Welcome to Demystifying Math. In this lesson, we're going to be discussing simplifying with factoring. We're going to be doing problems that are similar to those that a calculus student would see. Okay, for our first problem, we have 2x times x plus 1 plus x minus 2 times x plus 1. They have a common factor of x plus 1, so we're going to factor that out. In other words, we're dividing it out. So if we divide our first term by x plus 1, we're only going to be left with 2x. For our second term, we'll be left with x minus 2. So now all we need to do is simplify what's in the brackets. So we have x plus 1 times 3x minus 2. You can always check your work by FOILing everything out, combining like terms, and see if you get the same thing. For the second one, we have 5x squared times 2x minus 3 minus 3x times 2x minus 3. So our greatest common factor is 2x minus 3 and x. X is also a common factor. So we're going to pull both of those out. And when we do, we're actually dividing both terms by x times 2x minus 3. So for our first term, we're only going to be left with 5x, and for our second term, we're left with negative 3. Okay, for our next one, we're going to look for our greatest common factor. We have both a 5x minus 2 term, but one is squared and one is to the first power. We're always going to take out the lower degree. So that would be our greatest common factor in this case of 5x minus 2. So for our first term, we're left with 3x minus 1. For the second one, we're left with the x minus 1, but we had a second factor of 5x minus 2, so we have to include that. Okay, so now we need to simplify. So we're going to FOIL x minus 1 times 5x minus 2. So for our first terms together, we get 5x squared. Our outer is negative 2x. The inner is negative 5x. And the last gives me positive 2. Now what I'm going to do is distribute the negative. So I have negative 5x squared. I also combined the negative 2x and the negative 5x, which would have given me negative 7x. But I have a negative in front here, so that's going to make it a positive. And then we have the minus 2. Alright, so now all we do is combine our like terms in the brackets. So we have negative 5x squared plus 10x minus 3. Since I have a leading coefficient that is negative in the trinomial there, what I'm going to do is factor that out and bring it out in front here. Now when I do that, I'm really dividing every term in the brackets by negative 1. So the sign changes just on these. It would not change over here. But what I can do to not have a negative sitting out here is to distribute the negative inside the 5x minus 2, which means that I would have a negative 5x and a positive 2. So I just reordered them so I didn't have to start off with a negative. You could see the answers in an answer key, probably either one of these last 2 or 3 here. All of them are acceptable, but most often you'll see it as it is for the very last one here. Okay, let's try another one. We have x times 2x plus 1 all squared plus 3 times 2x plus 1 all to the 4th. Again, you want to take out the lower degree factor, so it's going to be 2x plus 1 all squared. Divide that into each one of your terms. So for the first term, we're going to be left with x. And for the second, we're left with 3, but we still had 2 additional factors of 2x plus 1 that we need to include. Now we're going to simplify this. So I FOILed out the 2x plus 1 all squared, which gave me 4x squared plus 4x plus 1. Then I need to distribute the 3 and then combine like terms. So we have 12x squared plus 13x plus 3. Now that happened to be factorable. So factor in any way that you feel most comfortable with, but you can always check your work. So you have 4x times 3x, which gives us 12x squared. The outer gives me 4x, and the inner gives me 9x, which gives me 13x, and the last gives me 3. Always check and see that these trinomials that you may be left with are factorable or not. So you want to continue factoring as much as you can. Okay, for our next problem, we're going to move into fractional exponents. In this case, we have x times 5x minus 3 to the 1/2 plus x squared times the 5x minus 3 to the 3/2. Just like we've done before, you want to factor out the lower degree. So 1/2 is lower than 3/2, so we're going to factor that out. We also have an x in common, so we're going to factor that out as well. So we're dividing x times 5x minus 3 to the 1/2 by itself. So our first term is going to become 1. Dividing it into the second term, we're left with an x, but we're also left with 5x minus 3 to the 1. Now, it's 1 because we would add these exponents when we multiply them. So we had a 1/2 plus 1, which gives us 1/2 or 3/2. Okay, so the next step all I did was distribute the x there. So we have 5x squared minus 3x. I'm just going to reorder that. Alright, so let's look at the next one. We have x minus 1 times 4x minus 1 to the negative 1/2, and x times 4x minus 1 to the positive 1/2. Again, what we want to do is factor out our greatest common factor, and we look for the lowest degree. So we're going to factor out a 4x minus 1 to the negative 1/2. So for our first term, we're left with x minus 1. And for our second, we're left with x times 4x minus 1 to the first power. So again, think about this as an implied 1 here. So when we distribute this to that, we would add the exponents. So negative 1/2 plus 1 gives me positive 1/2. Alright, so we're going to distribute the x. And we're going to combine like terms. And notice that the x's canceled out. Then what I want to do is factor the 4x squared minus 1, because it is a difference of perfect squares. It's going to factor into a sum and difference. And I'm also going to bring the 4x minus 1 to the denominator. Because it's a negative 1/2, I'm going to put it in the denominator as a positive 1/2. Then all I did was rewrite it as a radical. So 4x minus 1 to the 1/2 is the same as the square root of 4x minus 1. Okay, for our next problem here, it's very similar to problem 6. So I would suggest that you pause the video and attempt the problem on your own, then come back and check your work. Okay, our greatest common factor is 6x minus 5 to the negative 1/2. So we're dividing that out. When we divide it out, we're really going to subtract our exponents. So for the first term, where we have a positive 1/2 exponent, and we divide it by the same thing with a negative 1/2 exponent, we would subtract 1/2 minus negative 1/2, which gives us 1/2 plus 1/2, which gives us 1. So this exponent will be a 1. And then we are left with our second term, which is 2x minus 3. So again, we want to FOIL and combine like terms. So foiling out the 6x minus 5 times x minus 3, we're left with 6x squared. Our outer gives us negative 18x, the inner gives us negative 5x, and the last gives us positive 15. Then combining like terms, I did negative 18x minus 5x gave me negative 23x. And then add 2 and we get negative 21x. 15 and negative 3 gave me the 12. Now all three of these terms had a common factor of 3, so I divided out the 3 and brought it out in front here. So 3 times 2 is 6, 3 times negative 7 is 21, and 3 times 4 gives me 12. Then all I'm going to do is rewrite this without a negative exponent. And you could rewrite it as a radical as well if you need to. Okay, thank you for tuning in to Demystifying Math.